Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. Keep these words that I am commanding you today in your heart. Recite them to your children. Talk about them when you are at home and when you're away, when you lie down and when you rise. Bind them as a sign on your hand. Fix them as an emblem on your forehead. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. When your children ask you in time to come, what's the meaning of the decrees and the statutes and the ordinances that the Lord our God has commanded you? Then you shall say to your children, we were Pharaoh's slaves in Egypt, but the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand. When I was a little boy, I used to love to hear stories. I can remember I'd even gladly ride for hours in the car with my dad heading off to some backroads country church. I'd gladly ride along on a Sunday morning to hear him preach if he would just share some of his own life stories with me. I'd just listen to him and watch the rows of soybeans and rice go by. And I mean, it wasn't that he was a really great storyteller because he wasn't. But I had the sense that the stories he told were real and they had significance and that they'd given a shape to who he'd become. I also remember that we would get together on the holidays with family, larger family, and aunts and uncles and cousins and grandparents, you know, up in Princeton, Indiana, where my dad's people were, or way out in West Texas, out in El Paso, where my mom's family was from. And, you know, the stories were great. We'd be gathered around in a living room or a kitchen or something like that, and we'd all get to telling these stories. And, I mean, some of them were, you know, the ones that everybody knows by heart, and everybody knows where to laugh at the right spot and just enjoy it or gasp at the right spot because it was scary or adventurous. And then some of them were like dusty old memories that would just only resurface every so often and leave everybody just kind of struck with a sense of the moment. And I remember that what these all had in common, these stories, whether the person was a good storyteller, I mean, we had some really good storytellers, and they'd even pay attention to the syntax and the meter of their sentences. And then there were others that it just came out sort of stilted, timidly. But what all these stories had in common is a sense of that they had real meaning, that they really mattered, that they had significance in shaping the person who was telling the story, and in turn giving a collective sense of identity to our family, to our past and our present and where we were going. And in my house, as a little boy, on Stonewall Road, Little Rock, Arkansas, some 30-odd years ago, the most important stories were the Bible stories. They were told with the same sort of significance, gravity, meaning, accrued identity as the family stories. Or maybe it's more accurate to say that we just saw the Bible as our story. And that a new chapter was being written with each new generation. And I guess my favorite part of all these stories is that love wins and grace prevails and hope is answered. And so of a Sunday morning when I'm getting up to share some part of the story, it's the family story. And it's one that spans time and space with particular people and concerns and choices in which love wins and grace prevails and hope is answered by the power and the presence of God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. That's amazingly good news, because I don't know about your family, but in my family, a lot of the stories are about how we screwed up in a funny way that everybody can laugh at, or in a really sad way that still hurts. We all stand in need of some grace. The stories need to have some grace in them. And, you know, the amazing thing, too, is the possibility of redemption out of the ashes of tragedy. And my family's got some stories about that, too. And yet love wins. And grace prevails. And hope is answered. You know, I look around me here in this space, and I see symbols and I see signs, reminders of how God shows up in our lives. God shows up in all of our stories. God is intimately involved. He guides us. He teaches us. He strives with us, struggles with us, even suffers with us. But He empowers us. He celebrates with us. He lifts us up and gives us a name and a place and a future. This verse comes to mind. You shall put these words of mine in your heart and soul, and you shall bind them as a sign on your hand. You shall fix them as an emblem on your forehead. Teach them to your children. Talking about them when you're at home and when you're away, when you lie down and when you rise. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates, so that your days and the days of your children may be multiplied in the land that God swore to your ancestors to give them, as long as the heavens are above the earth.